In this video, you will learn how to transition from UDK to Unreal Engine 4. I'll cover some of the most basic functions that you would do inside UDK and how to do them inside Unreal Engine 4. So UDK was the previous version of Unreal Engine. It was the free edition of Unreal Engine 3, and you can still download a version of it on unrealengine.com/previous-versions. Unreal Engine 4 is the newer, updated version. It is completely free to download, just like UDK. You can download and install by going to unrealengine.com and then clicking on Get Unreal. It will take you to a sign up page. Just go through this menu and then be taken to a page where you can download Unreal Engine Launcher. Again, this is completely free. If you want to know the exact steps of how to download and install Unreal Engine, I have covered this in the tutorial. And if you go to worldofleveldesign.com, click on Unreal Engine 4 icon, scroll down and just go to this tutorial. The way you would download UDK is you download a specific version of the engine that was released, and then you would install that version. And then if a new version came out, you would have to re-download and install again as a separate installation. This was a little bit cumbersome to manage. In Unreal Engine 4, this works a little bit differently. You first download a small installation file, which is Epic Games Launcher, which installs a portal through which you can download and manage any version of the Unreal Engine. If there is a new version of the engine, you will see it here, and you can download and install that version. So you no longer would have to go out and look to see if there is a new version of Unreal Engine. You would just check through here, and then you'll be able to download that version onto your computer. Through the Unreal Engine Launcher, you will also be able to manage your Unreal Engine projects. In UDK, managing your projects was very difficult. To begin with, you would have to set up a folder inside the engine version that you installed. And then inside that folder, you would keep your maps, your static meshes, and all of your files for that project. So if you were to download a new version of the engine, you would then have to copy and paste that folder into the new version engine download folder. Also, when you launched UDK editor, you would be essentially working on many projects at once. This editor could be used for one project, and without shutting down or switching over, you could just go to File and open another project, another map, another environment, and all of the preferences were the same across every single project that you work on. Unreal Engine 4 project management works a lot different. Before you can launch the editor, you have to set up a new project. You get to choose Blueprint or C++, you get to choose a game template, a few other options, and you can save this project anywhere on your computer. So it does not have to be an installation folder anymore. And then you would name your project, and that project gets its own folder and all of the files associated with it. Also, when you go to your library tab in My Project section, here would be all of your projects that you are working on. And in order to launch Unreal Editor, you would launch that project. And now within this editor, you are only working on a specific project. And you can see the name of the project right here. All of the maps, all of the content files, and all of the preferences are kept inside this project. And when you shut down that version of the editor, you can restart a new project with its own maps, its own files, and its own preferences. And the best part is all of your projects are organized in their own folder, and they're a lot easier to manage. In UDK, your default game type was either an empty actor or a first-person shooter. If you wanted to set up any other game type, you would have to script it. In Unreal Engine 4, when you create a project, you get to choose which game template that you want to start off with. So instead of scripting simple gameplay mechanics like you would have to do in UDK, with Unreal Engine 4 you can choose first-person shooter, flying, puzzle, side-scroller, third-person, and so on. These game templates give you the gameplay mechanics to start with, so you don't have to do it yourself when you want to prototype an idea for a game or a level. The one cool thing that I really like in UDK is if you go to File, New Level, you get to choose from 4 different templates, different times of day. It gives you all the basic actors and a lighting scenario. In Unreal Engine 4, currently, there are only 2, Empty Level and Default. This isn't too bad because setting up a different time of day is very simple, just changing the color of the light, but having a few additional lighting templates would help. Keyboard shortcuts are almost identical between UDK, and Unreal Engine 4. So you should be able to speed up your workflow without having to learn extra keyboard shortcuts. There are a few essential ones that are missing from UDK to Unreal Engine 4, such as Alt-W to turn off the visibility of static meshes, or Alt-X to cycle between maximized and restored viewport. To edit and update your shortcuts in Unreal Engine is very simple. Go to Edit, Editor Preferences, and click on Keyboard Shortcuts. You can look through all of the shortcuts and assign a set of keys, or you can search for one. Here's the maximized viewport. We can just go ahead and do the same UDK shortcut, Alt-X. Now, one thing to note that these keyboard shortcuts will only apply to this project. If you were to open a new project, you would have to reset and reassign a new set of keys. So if you want to have same shortcuts across all of your projects, once you assign a set of keys that you like, export these shortcuts as a configuration file. I already have one right here. And then when you have a new project, just import this configuration file into that project. That way you can have those keyboard shortcuts across all of your projects from that single configuration file. In UDK, the interface contains a lot of icons and it is fixed. In Unreal Engine 4, the interface received a complete overhaul. All of the panels are no longer fixed like they were in UDK, so you can resize and restructure your layout in the editor to exactly how you want. You can drag off any of these panels and dock them anywhere you want. So now you can set up your editor layout to exactly how you like it. One of the features I really like is the ability to have tabs that go across the editor interface. So let me open up a material. And here we have the material editor. Now this could be a floating window, or you can dock it as a tab at the very top. And you can do this with multiple panels. So here we have another content browser. You can have static mesh editor. And then you can just switch between different tabs and then jump back to your editor, work, and then switch to other tabs. And then you can just quickly close them off. This helps a lot. And if you ever mess up the layout and want to go back to original, just simply go to Window and reset layout. Viewport navigation from UDK to Unreal Engine 4 is almost identical. In Perspective Viewport in UDK, you would have to press WASD keys to move around. And now with the right mouse button, you look around. In Unreal Engine 4, to move around, you have to press the right mouse button, and then you use your WASD keys. And then you move your mouse around to look around. But you have to press the right mouse button and keep it pressed as you move around and look around. If you want to disable, hold on the right mouse button as you move around and press the WASD keys. Go to Edit, Editor Preferences, Viewport, and under Flight Camera Control Type, change this option to any other two options that you have. If you liked the Maya style navigation in UDK, where you select an object and then you hold down the L key, and you use the left mouse button to rotate around that object, or the right mouse button to get closer and move back. This stays centered on the selected object. So in UDK, you'd have to press L and use the right and the left mouse buttons. To do this in Unreal Engine 4, you now have to press the Alt key. So select the object, press and hold Alt, and then the left mouse button will rotate around that object, and then the right mouse button will pan the camera in and out. And if you press F, this will center on the selected object, and then you can press Alt and left mouse button, or Alt and the right mouse button, moving the mouse around to rotate around that object. Orthographic viewport navigation is a little bit different. In UDK, left mouse button hold and press, hold and move, or the right mouse button hold and move, pan you around the orthographic viewport. And if you press Ctrl Alt, left click and drag, this gives you a marquee selection. In Unreal Engine 4, if you left click and hold and drag, this gives you marquee selection. And if you press and hold the right mouse button and move the mouse around, this gives you the panning tool. And the mouse wheel still zooms you in and zooms you out. placing actors inside the scene in UDK wasn't as intuitive and simple as it is in Unreal Engine. If you wanted to place a light, you had to right click, go to add actor, add a point light. If you wanted to place any other actor, you have to jump over to the actor classes, find that actor, and then insert it into the level. And BSP brushes were even more difficult to work with. In Unreal Engine 4, this entire process has been simplified. On the left hand side you have the modes panel, and if you go under place mode, here you will see all of your most commonly needed actors that you will find. So if you wanted to place a light, switch over to lights, add a point light, or add a directional light. BSP, just left click and drag right from this menu. Any visual effects such as fog, just left click and drag. So this workflow is a lot faster. So you will be using modes panel place a lot. And you can still go into perspective viewport, right click, place actor, and place some of the most recently placed actors or some of the more common ones that you would insert into the level. In UDK, to view all available actors, you have to access it through either click on the content browser and then the actor classes tab, or go to view, browser windows, actor classes. To find the same menu inside the Unreal Engine 4, go to window, developer tools, class viewer. And here you will find all available actors that you can use. In UDK, to find the developer tools, you would have to go to view, browser windows, and you would find them here. Primitive stats, building, texture, log. In Unreal Engine 4, you will find them under window, developer tools. Primitive stats, this menu right here, can be found under window, statistics. Content Browser is the content management system in both UDK and Unreal Engine 4. In UDK, to open the Content Browser, you would have to click on the top toolbar icon or press Ctrl-Shift-F. In Unreal Engine 4, the Content Browser is now part of the interface, and you will find it on the bottom here as its own panel. You can also have additional Content Browser windows open. Go to Window, Content Browser, and open any additional ones. You can have it as a floating window, or you can dock it at the top of the editor. Just as in UDK, where you can create new assets and import new ones, you have the same icons here in Unreal Engine 4, where you can create new assets or import created ones. The one big difference is how you organize your content. You now no longer have to create packages to store your content into them. Anytime you create a new asset or import a new one, you can store it inside the folder through the Content Browser. You can easily move different content, different assets from their folder into another folder just by left clicking and dragging anywhere you want. You can also create new subfolders. Let me go to this Content Browser instead. So new in the content folder, simply right click, create a new folder, name it, and then you would just import that content, those assets, into this folder. You can also navigate to your project folder, then navigate inside the content folder. Let me bring back Unreal Editor. And then here you will find the same folders that you see in the Content Browser. And instead of creating folders through the Content Browser, you can also create folders inside this content folder by right-clicking, go to New Folder, and create new folders. So organizing your content inside Unreal Engine 4 is extremely simple. And the best part, no more packages. Working with objects, moving, rotating, and scaling is the same from UDK to Unreal Engine 4. Select an object using the spacebar to cycle between rotate, scale, and move. Same shortcut keys as W, E, R to cycle between these three transformation gizmos. And you will find at the top of the perspective viewport, you have your move, rotate, scale selections, as well as switching between local and world coordinate system. In UDK, you have to double click on any object on any actor to open up the properties panel. In Unreal Engine 4, the property panel is now called Details panel. Left click to select any object, any actor inside the scene, and on the right hand side you will see the Details panel. And here, this is the properties menu. So simply selecting an actor will change that details panel for that actor. You can also have this detail panel as a floating window by going to Window, Detail, and then choosing Detail 2, 3, or 4. To see all advanced properties inside the details panel, left click on this icon. Let me move it out of the way. And choose Show All Advanced Detail. This will show all the available settings for that object. You will see this option in many of the panels. The use of scale in UDK is different than Unreal Engine 4. In UDK, one Unreal unit is approximately 2 centimeters. In Unreal Engine 4, one Unreal unit is 1 centimeter. So the character height in UDK is going to be smaller, and you're probably used to using Unreal character height at 96 Unreal units. In Unreal Engine 4, character height is 180 Unreal units. So the full Unreal Engine 4 character dimensions, the base scale is height at 180, width and length is 60. So if you were to create a BSP box with Unreal Engine 4 dimensions of a character, let's drag our BSP box inside the level, and in the details panel, with the box selected, we would set X and Y to 60 and height to 180, and make sure that it's positioned on the floor. And this would be our base dimensions for a character inside Unreal Engine 4. If you want to go more into depth about player scale and world architecture dimension, I have a tutorial at world.leveldesign.com. If you click on the Unreal Engine 4 icon and scroll down until you see Unreal Engine 4 Guide to Player Scale and World Architecture Dimension. UDK uses the power of 2 grid. So if we jump over to one of the orthographic viewports and use this drop-down menu, the power of 2 grid goes from 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and so on, and every time we change this grid size, we are increasing or decreasing the grid based on power of 2. In Unreal Engine 4, the grid size now uses a different and simpler system. Let's jump over to orthographic viewport. At the top of the viewport, use the drop-down menu, and the snap sizes now go from 1 to 5, 10, 50, 100, and so on. So no longer is Unreal Engine 4 uses the same grid size as it did in UDK. This system is a lot easier and simpler to use, and after spending a little bit of time, I do prefer this over the power of 2. You can still use the power of 2 grid inside Unreal Engine 4, and you can do this by going to Edit, Edit the Preferences, Viewport, and enabling Use Power of 2 Snap Size. But I do recommend that you spend some time and get used to the new standard decimal system of the grid size. In UDK, if you go to View, Browser Windows, Scene, this will list all of the objects that are inside your scene. In Unreal Engine 4, this is now World Outliner. You will find this on the upper right hand side. If you don't see this up here, go to Window and make sure World Outliner is checked. World Outliner is extremely helpful, and it is a way for you to manage your scene by finding objects, organizing them inside folders, and the ability to turn on and off the visibility of certain actors inside the scene. World settings are universal properties that can be changed for the entire environment. Things like physics, lighting, and post-processing can be changed through world settings. In UDK, you would have to access View, World Properties. In Unreal Engine 4, you'll find world settings on the right-hand side, docked right next to the Details panel. If you don't see world settings here, make sure you go to Window and make sure World Settings is checked. BSP brushes are the essential building blocks of blocking in and prototyping your level. In UDK, it was rather difficult to work with brushes, and it wasn't very intuitive. In Unreal Engine 4, the process has been updated. BSP brushes are now a little bit faster to work with, and to access BSP brushes, make sure you're on the Modes panel in the Place tab under BSP. And here you can left click and drag any of the primitive shapes right inside your level. The BSP brushes will be automatically updated without you having to rebuild geometry. When you select each BSP brush, you can change XYZ values or any of the other settings for that brush through the Details panel. But the easiest way to change brushes is to use geometry editing. And this menu is right here, Shift 5. And by switching over to geometry editing, You can then select each brush and then you get to access faces, edges, and vertices. Also, if you need to have a additive or subtractive brushes, insert any of the BSP brushes. In the details panel, you have brush settings. You can change from additive to subtractive. And make sure that you open up advanced details for additional properties that aren't being shown. The way you create materials in Unreal Engine 4 is completely different than UDK. Let me open up a material editor. I'm going to filter by materials. And just let's go ahead and open any of these. And let's dock this. Material editor itself is very similar to UDK, but the way you create those materials is very different. Unreal Engine 4 now uses PBR, or physically based rendering, which approximates how light actually works in the real world. So if you don't have any experience with physical based rendering, or PBR, then you'll have to spend a little bit of time learning about it. But in the end, it's actually a better way to create your materials. It's more intuitive and it looks a lot better. You can read a little bit more about physical based materials by going to this link and read up a little bit more about it so you're more familiar with PBR. Lighting is different inside Unreal Engine 4 as well. Under place mode, let's go to lights. You essentially have the same actors. You have a directional light, point light, spotlight, and a skylight, just as you did in UDK. But each light now contains 3 different properties. After you insert a light into your level, inside the details panel, let me open up a new details panel. You will have 3 different properties for mobility. You have static, stationary, and movable. Movable are your dynamic lights, and these can be changed during runtime at gameplay. And these are totally dynamic, have dynamic shadows, but just like dynamic lights in UDK, they are the slowest to render. Then you have your static lights. These are completely static, they can be changed during gameplay. These lights are baked in and they are the fastest to render. And then you have your stationary, which is a mix between static and movable. You can change at runtime during gameplay color and intensity of these lights, but all the other properties will be just as a static light. Essentially, stationary lights are going to be your main lights that you'll use inside the level. And then you will either change to static or movable, depending on case-by-case basis. One thing to note is when you have more than 4 stationary lights overlapping at the same time. So here I have 4, and if I have a 5th light, one of them will not work. Meaning that when you have 4 stationary lights with their radius overlapping and touching each other, one of these lights will become static. So in order to avoid this error, you'll just have to make sure that 4 stationary lights and their radius does not overlap. So you can have 4 of these overlap, but once you introduce a 5th light, you'll just have to make sure that you lower the radius of that stationary light. Now you can have more than 4 stationary lights on the level, but it's just more than 4 of these stationary lights cannot overlap. Another fix is you would just have to take one of these stationary lights and change its mobility to static or movable. In UDK, you had Kismet. This was the visual scripting language that you can use to script behaviors and interactions for your level. You could have even used Kismet to script out games without having to code and write Unreal script. Everything can be done inside the editor. In Unreal Engine 4, Kismet has been replaced by Blueprint. You'll find the icon right here at the top toolbar. The idea behind Blueprint is very similar to Kismet, but it's a lot more powerful than Kismet ever was. So you will have to spend a little bit of time getting familiar with Blueprint. But if you spend any time in Kismet, then jumping over to Blueprint is actually going to be faster, and I think you will enjoy Blueprint a lot more. One of the features of Blueprint is the ability to create class blueprints. Let me jump over to Content folder, go to Start Content, and go to Blueprint. Class blueprints are self-contained items that have behavior scripted into them. And once you've created a class blueprint, this can be used across any level and any project. And you would just simply redrag these items right from the content browser and you can duplicate them throughout your entire map. And each item would be scripted in Blueprint and have interactable behavior, which can be reused at any time. And if you wanted to update that class blueprint, you would just open that class blueprint, update a few properties, and the changes would apply to every instance of that class blueprint across your level. In UDK, your game, your project, and level configurations were stored inside an INI file. So any settings that you would change for your level or for your game would be self-contained inside a configuration file like this. In Unreal Engine 4, all the configurations are now self-contained inside the project, and you can set that up by going to Edit, Project Settings. Here you could go through all the menus and set up exactly how you want this project to work, and all of the configurations that you set would be self-contained and only part of this project. And the last part I want to cover, if you want to take your UDK project into Unreal Engine 4, here are some tips of what you can and cannot do. You cannot open your UPK package files or your UDK map files inside Unreal Engine 4. UDK static meshes and textures have to be re-imported into Unreal Engine 4. Also note that due to scale from UDK to Unreal Engine 4, static meshes used in UDK, and if they are imported into Unreal Engine 4, will be smaller. So you'll have to either rescale these static meshes inside a 3D modeling application and then import into Unreal Engine 4, or rescale them in Unreal Engine 4 editor. All the materials have to be recreated following the PBR workflow. Same for particle effects. They have to be recreated. Any Kismet setups that you have to be redone in Blueprint. If you have any Unreal script, then you'll have to rewrite it using C++, or figure out a way if you can script it in Blueprint. And last, if you have landscapes, then you can export height maps from UDK and then import those height maps into Unreal Engine 4. So I hope this tutorial was helpful to give you a broad overview of how to transition from UDK into Unreal Engine 4.